China's not sending us stuff like they used to, and it's about to get messy. You might not feel it yet, but walk through a Walmart in a few months and you'll see it. Empty shelves, higher prices, and that one thing you really need suddenly being out of stock. Why? Because US tariffs are finally doing what they were meant to, hitting Chinese exports hard. And now, China's punching back by cutting us off. Let's break this down. China's exports to the US just plunged nearly 13%. That's not a dip, that's a nosedive. And it's not just some blip on a chart. It's happening because of a trade war that's been brewing for years. The US slapped steep tariffs on all kinds of Chinese goods, tech gear, appliances, tools, raw materials, thinking it would bring manufacturing back home or at least hurt China's economy enough to give the US more leverage. But here's the twist. We still depend heavily on Chinese products. Everything from your phone charger to your kid's Halloween costume probably came from a Chinese factory. And now that those factories are shipping out less, we're starting to feel it. Retailers are already sounding the alarm. Many are scrambling to stock up before things get worse. Some big chains even doubled their orders early this year, hoping to outpace the slump. But that's just a short-term fix. Once that inventory dries up, prices go up, or worse, some products just disappear. At the Port of Los Angeles, which, along with the Port of Long Beach, receives around 40% of all imports from Asia, shipments were down 10% compared with the same period last year. That number is expected to keep falling. We are now beginning to see the flow of cargo to the Port of Los Angeles slow. Port of Los Angeles Executive Director Eugene Soroka said at a Los Angeles Board of Harbor Commissioners meeting on April 24th. It's my prediction that in 2 weeks' time arrivals will drop by 35%, he added. So yeah, it's not looking good for American industry and retailers. And if you're thinking, well, we'll just buy American, I hate to break it to you, there aren't enough domestic manufacturers ready to fill that gap. Not yet anyway. Some companies are trying to move production to places like Vietnam or Mexico, but setting up those supply chains takes time. Meanwhile, shoppers are caught in the middle. Even experts are warning of what's next. One economist said this could be the beginning of wider product shortages. Not just toys and electronics, but critical stuff like machinery parts and medical supplies. It's like pulling one thread and realizing your whole sweater is unraveling. And let's be real, this whole trade tension with China, it's not cooling down anytime soon. The political climate is icy, and both sides are digging in their heels. That means more tariffs, more restrictions, and more disruption on both ends. Meanwhile, President Xi Jinping's envoys are actively engaging countries worldwide with a unified message aimed at those negotiating with Donald Trump. The United States is an unreliable and coercive power, as the U.S. grants a 90-day window, excluding China, for nations to finalize trade deals. Chinese officials are moving quickly to sway foreign governments against Washington. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has indicated that after this grace period, the U.S. intends to have its allies confront China collectively, strengthening America's bargaining position. While traditional U.S. allies such as South Korea and the European Union depend on American military protection and are economically motivated to accommodate Trump, China is taking a different approach to the tariff dispute. Over the years since Trump's last trade war, Beijing has worked to reduce its dependence on American exports, and now boasts the world's largest active military force. Xi has avoided direct talks with Trump and is insisting on a mutual rollback of tariffs, while the U.S. demands that China initiate any de-escalation. In this standoff, Beijing is presenting itself as a defender of the international trade system and calling on other nations to align with it against U.S. pressure. This issue goes beyond China and the U.S., said Wu Xinbo, director of the Center for American Studies at Fudan University in Shanghai. It concerns the entire global economic and trade framework. Wu, who led a foreign ministry mission to the U.S. last year, argued that China's resistance has indirectly benefited other nations. Without China's defiance, would the U.S. have granted a 90-day reprieve to others? He asked, suggesting that pressure on China allowed Trump to ease tariffs elsewhere. In Washington, Central Bank Governor Pan Gongsheng recently told global economic leaders that the U.S. had gravely infringed upon China's rightful interests. Meanwhile, China's top diplomat Wang Yi rallied the BRICS nations in Brazil, urging them to oppose Trump's tactics. Silence and retreat only embolden the bully, he warned. Soon after, China's foreign ministry released an English subtitled video labeling the U.S. an imperialist force, citing historical trade restrictions on Japan as damaging to firms like Toshiba. Conceding to a bully is like drinking poison to relieve thirst. It worsens the problem, the video said. China will stand firm so that the vulnerable are heard. Despite widespread opposition to Trump's tariffs, especially within the European Union, many countries remain cautious about aligning too closely with China. Beijing's military assertiveness in the South China Sea and its posture toward Taiwan continue to raise alarms. Furthermore, Xi's backing of Vladimir Putin following Russia's invasion of Ukraine has drawn sharp criticism across Europe. Other countries are also wary of an influx of low-cost Chinese exports being redirected from the United States. During the recent G7 summit, Japan's finance minister Katsunobu Kato said members had agreed to press China to address internal economic imbalances. Even with growing concerns, most countries are still pursuing trade agreements with the United States, albeit slowly. India appears furthest along, working on a comprehensive deal across 19 sectors that would expand U.S. access to its agricultural markets, among others. But for many U.S. allies reliant on China for vital resources like rare earth minerals, the trade war presents a difficult balancing act. Beijing has warned against any agreements that could harm its interests, while Trump's advisors have considered pushing for secondary tariffs on nations closely linked to China, according to Bloomberg. In response, China is making diplomatic overtures to former regional adversaries in an effort to prevent them from siding with the United States. Beijing is set to host its first Korean pop concert in 9 years, signaling a potential end to the informal K-wave ban that began in 2016 after South Korea allowed U.S. missile defenses on its soil. Chinese Premier Li Qiang also recently reached out to Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, proposing a coordinated stance against U.S. tariffs. According to officials, Tokyo intends to resist any American-led coalition against China, its largest trading partner. Signs of improving ties with India include a planned visit by Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Beijing for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, renewed trade offers from China, and the reopening of a Hindu pilgrimage route along the disputed Tibetan border. China has pledged not to undercut global markets through dumping or unfair practices. Meanwhile, China's ambassador to Australia, Xiao Qian, launched a media campaign denouncing U.S. tariffs as a return to jungle law. In another piece, he criticized Trump for targeting remote territories, quipping, "Not even penguins are safe from U.S. tariffs." To broaden its support base, China is also dispatching lower-level delegations abroad. State-owned enterprises report that central authorities are encouraging provincial leaders to scout for new export markets, particularly in Latin America. Officials favor the region for its transparent governance and stronger growth potential compared to Africa or Southeast Asia, citing Argentina as a recent example. Despite Beijing's energetic diplomatic push, analysts like Neil Thomas from the Asia Society Policy Institute say it's unlikely to cause a wholesale shift away from the United States. But it might complicate efforts by a future Trump administration to build a cohesive coalition against China, especially on coordinated export controls or military exercises, he noted. So the next time you see a news alert about another tariff being slapped on, remember, it's not just a headline. It's the reason you're paying $29.99 for a mop that used to be $14. If you enjoyed this video, then please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.